buttercup, you're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall, won't stop till I get enough.
All right, listener, so you picked a heck of a game for this deep dive Bengals and Broncos overtime thriller playoff hopes on the line. I mean, talk about a nail-biter. We've got the game recap from CBS Sports here. Scores, play breakdowns, quotes, the whole 9 yards. Ready to unpack some serious football.
Oh, yeah, definitely. This one had me on the edge of my seat the whole time.
Right. And right off the bat, the Bengals made some seriously gutsy calls. 2 failed fourth down attempts, both in their own territory. I mean, I was thinking, what are they doing?
Yeah, I know, right? You'd think they'd play it safe, especially in a must-win situation. But they were going for it, taking those risks early on.
And for a while there, it almost backfired. Like they were digging themselves a hole. But then Joe Burrow does what Joe Burrow does. 4 touchdowns, 412 passing yards.
And don't forget, sacked 7 times.
7 times. And still pulls out a win in overtime. It's like superhuman at this point.
Burrow was incredible, no doubt about it. But those 7 sacks also highlight a potential weakness for the Bengals, right? If their offensive line can't protect him consistently, they're going to struggle against tougher defenses in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's a good point. Even with all those amazing plays, they got to tighten up that protection. Speaking of amazing plays, did you see that Higgins-Burrow connection? 3 touchdowns to T. Higgins, and the guy was battling an injury all game?
Yeah, Higgins is one tough player. Playing through that kind of pain takes real grit, and you can see that connection between him and Burrow is something special, especially in the red zone.
They just make each other better. Now let's flip over to the Broncos, D. They came in leading the league in sacks, and they lived up to their reputation getting to Burrow 7 times, like we said. But when they didn't get to him, he made them pay.
It's that Broncos defense, so aggressive, always trying to disrupt the play. And sometimes it works amazingly, and sometimes they overcommit.
It was like watching a magician. He'd escape those tackles, find an open receiver downfield for a big game. It was so frustrating to watch from the Broncos' perspective.
Yeah, it's risk versus reward. When their blitz worked, it was spectacular. But when it didn't, it left them vulnerable. Speaking of quarterbacks, Drew Lock had a bit of a roller coaster game himself.
Yeah.
Some great throws. That touchdown pass to Cortland Sutton was a beauty.
Beautiful.
But then that crucial interception late in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, that pick was tough. It felt like the pressure got to him. But then there's the big question in overtime, Coach Payton going for the tie instead of trying for the win. The tie would have clinched a playoff spot for them, but was that the right call?
It's a tough one.
Yeah.
You know, on the one hand, securing that playoff berth is the goal.
Yeah.
On the other hand, by playing for the tie, was he signaling a lack of confidence in his team's ability to win?
And did that impact the players? Because we can't forget about that missed deep ball in overtime. A chance for the Broncos to win the game. Locke overthrows a wide-open receiver. It felt like that play summed up their whole overtime strategy. Hesitant.
Yeah, a little bit off.
A little off.
Yeah, that missed opportunity was huge.
Yeah.
You have to wonder if Peyton had been more aggressive earlier in overtime, would his players have been more decisive on that play? We'll never know.
And then, of course, the game-winning play itself. The Bengals in overtime scored the first overtime touchdown in franchise history. Burrow finds Higgins again, and that's the game.
The stadium went wild. It was like everyone there knew they had just witnessed history.
Can you break down that final play for us? What made it work?
Well, first of all, Burrow's composure under pressure was phenomenal. He stood tall in the pocket, even with the pass rush bearing down on him, delivered a perfect strike to Higgins, and Higgins made an incredible catch.
Those two in sync like that, it's just beautiful. But the offensive line did their job too, right? Gave Burrow the protection he needed on that last play.
Absolutely. They stepped up when it mattered most, gave Burrow the time and space to make the throw. It was a collective effort.
So the Bengals snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. The Broncos are left wondering what if? And we're left with a ton of questions about both teams as we head into the final week of the regular season. But first, I want to go back to those early fourth down attempts by the Bengals.
Yeah.
What was going through their minds? Was it about establishing dominance or something else?
It's a good question. It's not often you see a team go for it on fourth down that early, especially in their own territory. Maybe they knew they had to be aggressive right out of the gate with their playoff hopes on the line.
Or maybe they just had that much confidence in their offense to convert.
Right.
And then there's the question of how those failed attempts affected their play calling later in the game. Did they get more conservative or did they stick to their guns?
Well, they didn't shy away from taking risks later on. They kept going for it on fourth down, and it ultimately won them the game. It seems like their philosophy was to trust their offense no matter what.
Which is pretty bold, but you got to admire their commitment to it. Speaking of bold, let's switch gears and talk about the Broncos defense for a bit. They've been a force all season, leading a league in sacks. But how effective were they against the Bengals, really?
I mean, they had their moments. They got to Burrow 7 times, which is impressive. But they also gave up some big plays, especially when they couldn't contain Burrow's scrambling. They seemed to struggle with that.
It was like they were so focused on getting the sack that they forgot about covering the receivers. And Burrow, being Burrow, he found those gaps.
Exactly. They were all about the pressure.
Yeah.
And sometimes that left them vulnerable. It's a classic trade-off. Every defense faces pressure or coverage. And the Broncos in this game definitely leaned towards pressure.
And while that works, sometimes it also backfired. It'll be interesting to see how they adjust going forward, especially against mobile quarterbacks like Burrow.
Yeah, definitely.
They need to find a better balance. All right, listener, we've covered a lot of ground here in this first part of our deep dive. We've talked about those risky fourth down attempts by the Bengals, Burrow's brilliance under pressure, the Broncos' aggressive defense, and that crazy overtime finish. But there's still so much more to unpack.
Yeah, we're just getting started. You know, one thing that really impressed me was how the Bengals just shrugged off those early mistakes. I mean, 2 failed fourth downs right out of the gate. That could have been deflating, but they just kept fighting.
Yeah, it's like it fueled their determination.
Yeah.
They didn't let it rattle them. They came back even stronger.
Exactly. Shows you their mental toughness and their belief in their system. They didn't abandon the game plan. They trusted their offense, and in the end, it paid off.
It takes a special kind of team to come back from that. Let's go back to Coach Payton's decision to play for the tie in overtime. I get the logic, a tie gets you to the playoffs. But did that conservative approach have a hidden cost?
That's a good question. You know, a tie might be the safe play, but does it send the wrong message to your players? Like you don't think they can win?
So you're saying by playing it safe, he might have created a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's possible.
Yeah.
And you look at that missed deep ball in overtime.
Yeah.
They had a chance to win, but they hesitated, just like their coach did earlier.
Almost like they were second-guessing themselves.
Exactly. And in a game like this, every inch, every second counts. Hesitation can kill you.
Those split-second decisions, those moments of doubt or confidence can really swing a game. Okay, before we move on to the Bengals' playoff chances, let's give some love to their defense. They don't always get the spotlight, but they held their own against a tough Broncos offense.
They did. They made some big stops, especially in the red zone. And that interception in the fourth quarter, that was huge.
Yeah, that turnover really shifted the momentum. Their run defense was impressive too. Bottled up those Broncos running backs, forced them to put the game on Locke's arm.
Which, as we saw, wasn't always the best strategy.
Exactly. So even though their defense isn't flashy, it gets the job done. They play with discipline, communicate. Well, it's a real team effort.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, so playoffs. The Bengals got a huge win, but they still need a lot of help to make it to the postseason.
It's a long shot, but crazier things have happened in the NFL. So Bengals fans got their fingers crossed for sure. Now the Broncos, they had a chance to clinch a playoff spot and let it slip away. Now they got to face the Chiefs next week.
And things just got interesting. You know, the Chiefs have already locked up the top seed, so they might rest their starters in Week 18.
Wow. So the Broncos' fate could depend on Andy Reid's decision to play Mahomes or not. This is why we love the NFL. Every game has a domino effect.
Absolutely. Every game matters, especially at this point in the season.
Okay.
One of the biggest takeaways for me wasn't just about the stats or the plays. It was the mental game, the psychology.
Right. How each team reacted to the pressure, the mistakes, the adversity.
Exactly. In a high-stakes environment like the NFL, mental toughness is just as important as physical skill.
You see it with the Bengals not letting those early failures get to them. You see it with Burrow staying calm under pressure. And then you see the Broncos, maybe a little hesitation, a little doubt.
It's a reminder that football is as much a mental game as it is physical. Staying focused, overcoming adversity, making decisions under pressure, that's what separates the good from the great.
Well said.
It's not just the players, though, right?
Yeah.
Coaches got to make those tough calls, too.
Yeah.
Like Coach Payton going for the tie. He was thinking big picture, but did it affect his team in those last few minutes?
That's what I love about football. The strategy, the psychology, it all comes together in those huge moments. So as we wrap up our deep dive into this wild Bengals-Broncos game, I want to leave you with something to think about.
Okay, hit me.
Imagine you're coaching the Broncos' overtime tied score. A tie gets you into the playoffs, but you also have a shot at winning the game. What do? Play it safe. Take the tie. Or risk it all, go for the win.
Man, that's a tough one. Every coach is different. Some are risk takers, some play it safe.
Exactly. No right or wrong answer, but it's a question worth asking. Those choices, those moments of truth, they can define a whole season, a career.
And sometimes they come back to bite you. Sometimes they lead to amazing things. That's sports, right? Unpredictable, dramatic. You never know what's going to happen.
So listener, maybe you'll think about those everyday choices a little differently now. Do you play it safe or go for it? Maybe we all have a little Coach Payton in us.
Maybe we do. That's why we love this game so much. It's a mirror to our own lives, our struggles, our victories.
Well said. So that wraps up our deep dive. Thanks for joining us as we broke down this crazy Bengals-Broncos game.
It was fun.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep. We'll be here to guide you.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up. We'll have a ball. I'm sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.